Hi guys, what's up and welcome to your first project for our 2D animation class. For this exercise, we will be animating this simple logo animation. You will have 1 week to do this and I will just need 5 seconds of animation from you guys. So this is our example output. Okay, before we start, I just want to introduce you to the interface of Adobe After Effects. So if you've used Photoshop or Illustrator, it's very much the same. And also if you've used Adobe Premiere, you can see the similarities as well. So here at the bottom, we have our timeline. This is where we see all of our layers and then the duration of our videos. So you can see. And at the same time, this is where we can adjust the timing of our keyframes and then also adjust the timing of our different elements. Here at the center, we can see the composition window. This is where we can see the preview of our animations and also the final look of our designs. Here on your left is the project window. This is where you see all of your elements in your scene, at the same time your composition, and also this is where you import all of your video files, images, and audio. To your right are the other window settings. So we have the effects and presets, align, libraries, and even the character window over here. On the top, we have the menu settings. So we have the composition, the layer settings, the effect, animation, and the window. Okay? So before we start any motion graphics animation, we usually design our look in Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. So I'm gonna go to Adobe Photoshop. So here we are at Photoshop. As you can see, we have our design from our Adobe After Effects example from before. The first thing you should remember is if you want to animate anything separately, you need to put it in different layers. So here we can see the letter M is in a different layer by itself. Also for the cursor, and then the stars, and then also the background. If you're gonna do your designs in Adobe Illustrator, it's pretty much the same. So let's go to Illustrator. So here you can see all of our elements are again in separate layers. So it's very important that you do this so that you'll able to animate it in Adobe After Effects. So if you're in Illustrator, just save it as a normal Illustrator file. Or if you're in Photoshop, you can save it as a PSD. The example I've uploaded in Google Classroom is in Adobe Photoshop file or PSD. Let's go to After Effects. Okay, so let's create a new project. So go to File, New, and then Project. Okay, so let's import our Photoshop file. Let's go to File, Import, and then go to File. Then let's look for logo gif.psd. I already uploaded this in Google Classroom. Make sure to set the import settings to composition so that we are able to animate all of the layers separately. And then click OK. So here, we'll just click OK because we already set it to composition. And now we see all of our elements in our project window. So here, if we zoom in the folder, we can see all of our different layers. You don't need to rearrange it in Adobe After Effects because it's already made for us. So we just need to click this composition icon. And then now we can see all of our layout from Photoshop in After Effects. So these are all of our layers. Okay, so how do we animate in Adobe After Effects? So basically, we will access the properties of each layer over here. So if we zoom in, you can see each layer has this triangle icon on the left. Okay, so let's try to animate the letter M. So if we select this and then let's open up its properties and then open up transform, you can see the properties over here. So we have anchor point, position, scale, and rotation, and also opacity. So if you play around with the settings over here, you can see that the opacity drives the transparency. The rotation rotates our layer. The scale makes it bigger or smaller. And the position moves it from left to right and up and down. And then the anchor point If you click and drag this, you can see that it moves closer or farther from our cross icon over here. This is called an anchor point. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is move our anchor point to the center of our layer. Why? Because if we click on the rotation, all of our rotation is coming from this point over here. So if we want to rotate our letter M in the center, we need to move this at the center of our layer. So to do that, let's select letter M, and then up here on your upper left, look for the anchor point tool. Okay, so let's click on that, and then let's move this in our composition window. Let's click and drag this to the center of our letter. Now, if we click on the rotation, all of our attributes or all of our settings are now being driven in the middle of our layer. Okay, in our other layers, make sure that the anchor point is set at the middle before you start animating. Okay, so how do you create animations? Basically, you would need to create keyframes. So a keyframe is basically a recorded pose of any of the attributes over here. So what do I mean? To set a keyframe or a pose for a property or attribute, you click on the stopwatch icon right beside the properties. For example, the rotation properties or the opacity. So maybe a good example would be the opacity. Let's click on the stopwatch over here. And then here we can see that we've created a diamond. That is a keyframe. To be able to animate, you need at least 2 keyframes for your layer. Okay? Right now, we don't see anything that is changing in our composition. But if we add another keyframe, for example, another opacity setting here, if we set this to 0, now we can see that it's fading out. So if we want this to be in reverse, all we need to do is just reverse the keyframes, and then we now have a fade-in effect. Okay, so how do you control the speed of the animation? So if I zoom in using my plus and minus keys on my keyboard, you can select all of your keyframes and just click and drag this to adjust the timing. To make your animation faster, you would need to make the keyframes closer together so that it would be faster. If you want your animation to be a little bit slower, you just need to keep your keyframes more farther apart. That's basically it. So again, if you want faster animation, keep the keyframes closer together. If you want slower animation, keep the keyframes farther apart. So here we have a fade-in effect. What we can do is actually copy these keyframes and then apply it to our other layers over here. Okay, so for now, I want to hide all of the other elements in my timeline. So let me just select all of the other letters that I would need to animate. So motion. And then maybe let's select all of these and then change the color maybe to yellow so that we would see it more clearly. So if you want to hide the rest of the elements here in the timeline, you can select all of them and then we can access what we call the shy layer. You can see the icon over here. It looks like a mask or like a clown mask. And then you activate the hide all layers using the shy attribute. So let's select all of these and then just click and drag to activate the shy layer. Now, if you click the shy icon over here, it's now hidden from our timeline. So if I zoom out again, so you can see, if I click the shy layer here, it's hidden from our timeline, but it's still there. You can still see it at the composition window. It's just that it's hidden over here so that we can focus more on the layers that we are gonna animate. Okay, so let's also select all of our other layers over here at the bottom. And then let's click and drag our shy layers. So once again, if I select all of this and then you click the shy layer, it's activated to all of your other layers. And then when you click the shy icon over here, it's going to be hidden in your timeline. Okay, next is let's access the keyframes from our M layer. So I'm going to show you a shortcut. So instead of clicking all over, for example, this icon over here, then clicking on transform, and then looking for opacity, you can see the keyframes that you've made before by pressing the letter U on your keyboard. Okay, so now you can see the keyframes that you added before. And now we can just select the two of these and then copy it to our other layers. So to copy our keyframe, just go to Edit, Copy, and then select our layers, and then make sure the position of the time slider is set to the beginning so that our animation will be pasted here, and then go to Edit and then Paste. Now you can see all of our letters now disappeared because here we have the opacity setting of 0. But if we scrub our time slider forward, we can see all of our letters are fading in. Okay, so if we select all of our layers over here and we press the letter U, we can see all of our keyframes. Okay, so there are two ways to adjust the timing of your layers. One way is to select the keyframes and then move this to the left or to the right of your timeline. And then the second way is selecting the whole layer and then clicking and dragging it so that the whole layer moves to the left or to the right of your timeline. So maybe let's just try to have a sort of like stairs layout of our layers over here. So this is the letter M, and then I'm gonna select all of the other layers below it, and then I'm just gonna move this to the left so that it's gonna fade in, and then the rest of the layers follow. I'm just gonna do a stairs effect so that there will be like a gradual fade in of all of the letters. Okay, now so we did a stairs effect for our different layers. As you can see here, we now have a gradual fade in effect for our text. So if you want to add other elements like a rotation or a scale animation for your letters, you can still do so. For example, here we can just click to open the transform attributes again. Okay, so here we're just gonna add a scale animation. So I'm gonna click on the scale stopwatch, and then here I'm gonna set it to 0. So it's gonna be a small letter M. If I move my time slider forward and then set the scale to 100% again, we now have 2 keyframes. But if we scrub our time slider now, we have a sort of like scale-in effect. And then I want this scale-in effect to happen alongside our fade-in effect. So I'm just going to select these 2 keyframes together, and then I'm going to move this to the very beginning. So now we have a fade-in and scale effect at the same time. So if you're satisfied with that, you can actually copy this effect to the rest of your layers over here. Make sure first that the anchor point is set to the middle of your letters. So let's just click on the anchor point tool here again. And then let's just adjust all of our other anchor points. So for example, there we have the O, we have the T. This is the I layer. And then we have the O layer. And then we have the N. Okay, so now if I open up the transform attributes again and then I play around with the scale, our layer is now scaling properly. So let's just select our keyframes from over here, from our first layer, from a letter M. Go to Edit, copy it, and then let's paste it in our other layers. So since we already did a stair layout for our elements over here, we need to make sure that our time slider is at the very beginning of our layer duration. So let's select this, go to edit, and then paste. And then to see our keyframes, I'm going to press the letter U. So here we have the scaling effect happening for our letter O. And then we can also paste it with our other elements. Make sure your time slider is at the very beginning. And then let's paste it. So the shortcut for paste is actually Control V or Apple V if you're on a Mac. The shortcut for copy is Apple C if you're on a Mac or Control C if you're on Windows. So now I'm just gonna paste this again to the letter I, edit, paste, and then I'm gonna press the letter U so that I can see the keyframes. And then here, let's go to edit and then paste. We can see the keyframes over here. Select, edit, paste. Okay, so we have all of our keyframes now in place. So let's select all of our letters and then let's minimize our attributes and then let's preview this. Okay, so it's going a bit slow. That's no problem. We just need to adjust the keyframes for our animation. So now, I think we're under 2 seconds. Next, let's try to animate the bars over here. Let's click on the shy layer to show all of our other layers again. And then now, let's zoom in. And then we need to unshy our bottom bar and our top bar. And then let's change the color to maybe red. And then let's move this up. Okay, so now, let's click on the shy layer again. And then let's animate our bars. So here we have our top bar. If I open this up, and then I click on rotation, you can see that our pivot point is at the middle. Now let's just adjust it using the anchor point tool and then move this anchor point to the side of our bar, which is here. So the reason that I placed our anchor point here and not in the middle is because if I place it here and then I click on the rotate, the rotation value will be driven at this very point. But it's really up to you. If you want to rotate the bar at the middle, you can place it there to have your animation keyed at that area. So let's select our anchor point and let's adjust it here. And then right now, I'm just gonna click on the rotation. So this is my initial position, position 1. Let's move this forward and then let's position this back to 0. Okay, now we have a swivel effect or rotating effect. And then we can also add an opacity effect. So here, I'm gonna set this to 0. And then let's move forward. And then let's set this to 100%. So now we have a fade in effect and a rotation effect for our bar. And then also we can just click and drag this. So you can actually put this in front of your layer, or you can just click and drag the layer so that it would be cut when your keyframe starts over here. Then after that, you can just click and drag this to adjust your timing. So let's now animate our bottom bar. So let's just select our bottom bar. And then again, I'm going to open my attributes. As you can see, the anchor point again is at the center. We need to adjust this to the bottom right part of our layer. And then here, I'm going to click on the rotation and then set an initial position. Then let's move our time slider forward and then adjust this to 0. So now we have a rotation effect. And then let's also add an opacity or fade in effect. So I'm going to click on opacity. So be sure to remember that before you start animating or adjusting any of the settings here, make sure you click on the stopwatch first and then start adjusting. For beginners, it's a common mistake to start adjusting and wonder why there's no animation. Just make sure to click on the stopwatch first, and then if you see a keyframe, that's already your first pose, and then move the time slider and then set it to another pose, for example, a 0%. And now if you want to sort of like have the animation in reverse, all you need to do is just rearrange the keyframes here. For example, this is opacity 0%. I'm just gonna move it forward. So now I have a fade in effect for my bottom bar. What you can also do is click and drag the duration of your layer here so that it would start at this area. So this duration is similar to like editing in Adobe Premiere. If you don't see the bar hitting the time slider, it means that this layer is invisible to the composition window. If you see the bar hitting the time slider over here, it should be visible unless you set the opacity to 0%. Okay, so let's move this forward, and now we have our animation for our bars. So last but not least is we'll try to animate the cursor. The rest of the elements, I'll leave it up to you on how you would want to animate it. So I'm gonna click on the shy layer again, and then I'm gonna look for my cursor. I'm gonna deactivate the shy layer, and then click on this icon again to show my cursor with my other elements. So I'm gonna open the transform attributes again, and then here and the cursor again, I'm gonna check my pivot point is at the center. Let's move this using the anchor point tool again, like so. All right. Now, if I scale this, I can have a click effect. If I rotate this, it's rotating at the tip of my cursor. And then we can also have the position or animate the position of our cursor. So let's try to animate this position attribute first. So let's click on our stopwatch, and then here I can just move this forward in my composition window. So now you can see that we have a straight line position change. Here, in between these two keyframes, you can actually add another keyframe. For example, if you want this to be moving down and then going back up, you can actually place your time slider at the middle and then just adjust your cursor so that it will have a third keyframe driving it. So you have 3 different positions. You can also have a click effect. So all you need to do is just activate the scale and then move your time slider down. So if you imagine a click effect, so basically we have our normal scale here, and then we can scale it down and then scale it back up. So we have the normal size and then making it smaller, and then it goes back. So that's our click effect. And then you can add a few more keyframes for your cursor. And then actually copy this scale keyframe like so, and then paste it. Make sure your time slider is moved to the position where you want that scale effect to happen. And then you can see we now have 2 different click animation effects here. Okay, so let's just minimize all of our other layers. So last but not the least is here at the bottom, I placed sort of like a text preset for you guys so that you can put your name. So to make it editable, just go to layer and then look for convert to editable text. That's around here. Create and then convert to editable text. If you're in an older version of Adobe After Effects, it's usually over here. Just look for this one, convert to editable text. Once you click on that, the icon will change. And now you can actually change this using your type tool. So if you select all of this, you can rename this by clicking and dragging and just putting in your name or typing in your name. And then let's zoom out. So I'm using my using my less than and greater than keys in my keyboard to zoom in, zoom out on my composition window. I leave it up to you for animating the stars and then the other elements. So once you're done, make sure first that your work area is set to 5 seconds. So here you can see we have the 4-second mark. So our time slider is at 4 seconds. We can actually change this to 5. So here, so we have milliseconds, seconds, minutes, and hours. So we are now at 5 seconds. You can just click and drag your work area so that After Effects will save the video only at the 5-second mark. Or the shortcut for this would be if you press the letter N, the tail of our work area will automatically go to the time slider. Okay, so once we set that, we can actually cut this off. For example, we don't want to see anything else afterwards. You can actually set the work area and then go to composition and then trim comp to work area. So if you click on that, our whole animation will be limited to 5 seconds. So once you're done with your animation, we need to render it as a video. To render it as a video, go to composition and then click on add to render queue. So it will open up this render queue window. So don't worry about the settings here. You just keep it at the default. Here in the output module, just click this. Make sure it's set to QuickTime, or if you're in Windows, set it to AVI. But I think it's easier to upload if you render it in QuickTime. So for those Windows users, if you have QuickTime, make sure to set it in this setting. Keep the format at the default. Okay. And then later on, we can turn off the audio if you just want the video. But let's also keep this at the default settings as well. Then click OK. Next is the output 2. Just click on the text or the blue text beside it. This is where you will set the location of your render or your file. So I'm going to set mine on the desktop. And then I'm going to name this exercise 1. And then put in your last name. And then first name. Then click save. And then once you're finished, just click on the render button to the right. And then you're done. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next project.